Hello everyone, Sean here. It's been a while since I've updated my Shadow Priest guide, so I decided I'll update it with the AS version, which is slightly outdated now, which means I'll have to go more in depth, which means that you'll need a lot more knowledge to start playing AS. So first off, just like in the last video, I'll go over my talents, glyphs, and then I'll tell you what the rotation is, and then I'll give you a first-hand experience of how it should be played. So with talents, things stay the same for the most part. So for tier 1, we have Desperate Prayer, Spectral Guise, and Angelic Bulwark. Now, just like in Blackrock Foundry, there are things which we can guise to make the fight a bit easier. An example would be Shadow Lord Iskar and the Chakrams. So, as a Shadow Priest, if we spec into Guise, we can then guise to Chakram, and then all three of them disappear. It's something which I found out recently, but it can be quite useful if your raid is struggling with the damage and if people aren't aware of where they should go. You can help your raid out by guising. Now, just so you know, you can only guise it if it's on you and you get the first Chakram. As a range, you usually always get it first, but just so you know, prepare beforehand. Desperate Prayer and Angelic Bulwark. Same thing, it just helps to take pressure off the healers, especially in fights where healing becomes very hard and mana becomes scarce. You'll want to make sure you take as much pressure off as possible. In tier 2, Feather, it gives us so much mobility. Body and Soul, it's going to counteract with any Disc Priests you have in your raid, and obviously they're going to get quite annoyed if, as healing becomes harder and harder, and you're shielding yourself, and then the debuff you have, Weakened Soul, makes it so they can't save you. Phantasm, I haven't found any use for it yet, so Angelic Feather is what we want to go for. Now tier 3, this is where we tend to switch around. With the new Shadow Priest 2 and 4 set, which reduces the cooldown on Shadow Fiend and Mindbender to 20 seconds, and 4 set it gives us a 20% multi-strike. Now, on fights with a lot of mobility, you'll want to use Mindbender because you're just not going to have enough time to channel Insanity twice, or enough to make it do more damage than Mindbender. Now, for those of you that don't know, Mindbender scales with spell power, so the more gear you have, the more damage your Mindbender will do. And with the 4 set and 2 set, it does a rather large amount of damage, which for some people who haven't played AS before, or Mindbender, it's going to be a bit weird to get used to the damage. And fights with minimum mobility, so a fight like Cormrock and Killrock. There are other fights, but I'm not going to go into a lot of depth, but this is just a basic guide. Now with the 2 and 4 sets, you will want to use Mindbender off cooldown unless you want it to line up with maybe Legendary Ring, Heroism. You get the idea. It's just all about pre-planning when you should and shouldn't use your cooldowns. Tier 4, haven't found any use of Psychic Scream or Dominate Mind. Same for Void Tendrils. There are some times where ads need to be routed. It tends to be more trash than ads in a boss fight. Going on to the next tier, Twist of Fate. Once again, the Ghostly talent. It gives us an extremely high amount of damage, especially when our Execute kicks in. For Power Infusion, like I said last time, it may be good on a short fight where you want to go for a high log, a rank. But for progress, I would say stick with Twist of Fate. Next tier, Cascade and Halo is generally the same as what I said last tier. You'll want to use Halo on fights where ads die quickly. A good example of that would be Iskar once again. If your raid is a lot of DPS and the ads die really quick, then Halo will be better because you're getting a large burst off on a small clump of ads. Whereas Cascade will be good on fights where you have a constant flow of mobs that don't die quickly. An example of that would be Hellfire High Council. You constantly have 2 bosses up which you can bounce Cascade between. And when Blade Master goes into his mirror phase, you can bounce Cascade through the entire room. It's a massive damage increase. Now the last tier, Once again, you will want to switch between Clarity of Power and Auspicious Spirits. So it's good to make sure you have good knowledge on both specs so you're not flustered when you have to switch. Now, depending on your gear, you'll want to use Clarity of Power on more fights than less. So the two fights you will want to use Clarity of Power on would be Cormrock and Fellow Tycoon. Now, Clarity of Power becomes very strong with the Clash Trinket, which I will show you right now. Because Clarity of Power is centered around Insanity being our big filler and where our damage comes from, the Clash Trinket gives us a large amount of sustain. Auspicious Spirits will be used on fights where you have generally more than one mob, because the constant flow of orbs gives us a constant flow of DPS. Now, like I said a few moments ago, there are some fights where you may want to just use Clarity of Power on because you know that you have more gear for it. So maybe on Iron Reaver, you may find it a bit more beneficial. Less so on Mythic, because Clarity of Power doesn't really let you switch to a lot of mobs. You can burst down one bomb at a time, but it becomes harder and harder to switch. I would recommend doing some more reading up to see what fights are better for more specs, because like I said, this is just a basic guide. Now for glyphs, things generally stay the same. We have our Power Word Shield glyph to... Oh, sorry, that's the wrong page. There we go. We have Reflective Shield to convert some damage, or some of the damage we take, into damage that reflects on the boss. Embrace, like I said, some abilities scale with spell power, Embrace being one of them. The more spell power you have, the more healing throughput you have, which then means the glyph becomes so much more powerful. And Fade, take pressure off the healers, take pressure off yourself by having something to reduce damage. Now the rotation for AS is easier than Clarity of Power once you can get into the flow of things. Now obviously, because I have the new tier pieces, my rotation will be a lot different than yours. Obviously, if you do not have the 2 set in tier 18, you're not going to be able to spam your Mindbender, which is unfortunate. So like last time, I'll be treating this like a raid encounter, so I'll assume you have a flask, a pre-pot, maybe even a rune. So, depending on how much haste you have, the pre-pull will usually be around 2 to 3 seconds. For me, I usually precast Mind Blast as 1 comes in, because then my Mind Blast will reach the boss as the boss is pulled. So we will pre-pot at around 2 seconds. As soon as you see the 1 come up, you would Mind Blast into Shadow Word Pain. If you have the tier pieces, you would then Mindbender into Vampiric Touch, and then off with the cooldowns. So I'll show you how that looks right now, and then I'll help you out with the rotation. Let's go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mindbender, Vampiric Touch. And obviously, because I have the Legendary Ring, I'll be using it right now, and I'm not going to stand in melee because it's just not required for me, especially on this preview. So when you reach at about 4 orbs, if you're using Insanity, this is when you would use it, around 4 orbs. Obviously I'm using my Mindbender, so I don't have Insanity up. But just like the Clarity of Power, it will be 2 channels, and then you're off again. So the weave stays the same. It's 2 channels, repeat, and then it's back to a standard rotation of making sure your dots never fall off. It's crucial that you never let pain fall off, because you want to have a constant flow of spirits. And if you have the faucet, you'll want to make sure you use my embed off cooldown, unless you want to line it up with something further on down the line. Of course, if you want any of my weak auras, which I will try to open right now, basically I just have my ring weak aura and something to track my spirits and some damage. If you have any questions, you can find me, there we go. You can find me on Kazakh with perfectcircle.eu under White Rain, or you can send me a message on YouTube. Thank you very much, and I'm out.